Okay, we're recording. Let's get going. All righty, D-Day. D-Day, what's our year? What's our year? Anybody out there?
The year for D-Day is...
Let's see if you guys are actually learning anything.
Isn't it 1939?
Good, that's when the year started. Yeah, very good. That's the year the war started. So you're going to use that here in our first paragraph here.
1941.
19 what?
Oh.
Wait, never mind. No.
It is 1900s.
1944.
1944. Okay, June 5th, 1944. What does D-Day describe? What happened on D-Day? Oh no, nobody knows anything. Nobody knows what D-Day is? Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers. You guys all being shy?
They went to Germany.
Okay, they're gonna get to Germany. Yep. All right. Well, we'll learn then. We'll learn. Oh man. Okay. Praise the Lord. So here's your general outline. I'm just going to be talking about. I'll add a few notes, but that's what needs to be in our summary. We're going to talk about D-Day. We're using kind of this momentous battle of World War II. Last week we talked about war in the Pacific. Now we're going to talk about war in the in Europe. In the what they call the European theater, and D-Day is kind of one of the signature moments of that battle. I'm sorry, that war, that theater. And so we're using D-Day. So make sure you know what that is by the end of the writing of your summary. But we're basically talking about the war in Europe in this summary. The first thing I want to say is, I'll just put this as a note. Tell a story. Okay. Some of you in your last summary. And I know it's kind of hard because we're doing this distance thing, but when you write your paragraphs, don't just write a bunch of sentences connected with periods and capitals that are just your notes. Tell the story. Make sure your paragraph actually tells a story. Make sure your ideas actually connect. A lot of the summaries I read were just almost like telegraph messages connecting one fact to another, and it didn't really show me that you even knew what you're talking about. So try to tell a story within each paragraph. So the first story you need to tell in the big story of D-Day is about appeasement. Anybody tell me what appeasement is? What does it mean to appease somebody?
Let them have something.
Yeah, let them have something. Give them what they want. You've seen maybe parents do this with kids in the checkout aisle at a grocery store or in a toy store. They want something and the parent says no, so the kid starts throwing a fit. And in order to avoid conflict, this is a key idea here. You will give people what they want. All right, you can do it. Just stop crying. All right, stop. You do it. Just stop throwing a fit. All right, just you can have what you want. And it's important to understand that appeasement is key to the start of this story of the war in Europe. Okay. The first thing you want to talk about is the rise of totalitarianism in Europe. Totalitarianism is a kind of a form of government that has how much control? A little bit, some, or total control over a society. That's right, total control, totalitarianism. And you see this arise in 3 countries. You see it rise in Italy, where we have fascism. And you see it arise in Germany, where we have the rise of the Nazis, called National Socialism. And you also see it rise in the Soviet Union, where you have it as communism. And so setting up why World War II happens is the rise of these governments, where you have governments taking total control over their citizens. Fascism in Italy, Nazism, National Socialism, is what it's also called in Germany, and communism in the Soviet Union. All right. And the reason why did people want this? This is the 1930s. Why do we see a rise of totalitarianism in the 1930s? Well, just remember what we were saying about the economies. What was going on during the 1930s, not only in the United States, but throughout Europe, was a Great Depression. There was a big economic depression going on. People were scared. Hey, kind of similar to right now, the economy is struggling, and people were willing to give either communism or fascism. Benito Mussolini was the leader in Italy. Obviously, Adolf Hitler in Germany. Joseph Stalin in the Soviet Union. And so people were willing to give up their freedoms and give these guys more power because they needed a sense of security. They were seeking a sense of security during times of uncertainty in the 1930s. And so you get these powerful governments rising up in places like in Germany, Italy, and the Soviet Union. You know, in America, we get the New Deal, which for America was a huge growth of government, but it goes even further in various European countries. And so then that takes us then here to Hitler. So Hitler becomes chancellor in Germany in 1933. And so he begins to immediately, one reason he came into power was, again, how did Germany feel after World War I? They felt abused. They felt manipulated. They were blamed for the whole war. They had to pay these incredible reparations, and it destroyed their economy. They had their Kaiser taken away. They were forced to become a republic, and there's a lot of resentment in Germany. So one of the reasons Hitler's able to be given so much power is because he says, you know what, I'm going to make Germany powerful again. I'm going to make people proud to be German again. I'm going to restore our fortunes abroad. And so one of the first things he does is he's going to ignore the Treaty of Versailles. This was World War I. He's saying, forget this. We made all these promises. Those guys who made those promises were weak rulers. I'm not weak. So I'm going to defy the Treaty of Versailles. And so he begins to ignore all these restrictions put on Germany after World War I. Your handbook went over some of those. He basically said, well, I'm going to rearm. I'm going to rebuild our army. I'm going to occupy this area called the Rhineland, which was between France and Germany. He annexes Austria. So basically, Austria was a nation to the south of Germany. He basically says, okay, we're going to take that over, and it's going to become part of Germany. If you've ever seen The Sound of Music, that takes place in Austria, and those are Austrians. And the conflict at the end of that movie, all these Nazis start showing up. That's basically because the Nazis, Germany has annexed Austria and has taken it over. Then they go on and they invade Czechoslovakia. And this is where Europe almost goes to war. Finally, after all these insults, Hitler's breaking all these rules. He's the kid in the candy store doing all these things that the parents are saying are wrong. And finally, when they invade Czechoslovakia, Europe goes, hey, you shouldn't do that. And Hitler goes, well, what are you going to do about it? And
we're going to declare war.
Yeah, well, they actually, with Czechoslovakia, they basically say, well, nothing. You can have Czechoslovakia, but just don't do it anymore. You need to stop. That's foolish. Don't do that.
Like, they were like, you can invade some of Czechoslovakia, just don't go anymore. And then he comes home and like, oh, look at Hitler's invading the rest of Czechoslovakia.
And so that's Czechoslovakia. That's this key idea of appeasement. Hitler was breaking all these rules. If Europe at any time had said, hit Germany, you can't do that, and they had sent troops to stop him, Hitler was weak. Germany was weak. They could have never been the World War II. But instead, they appeased him. They said, okay, just don't do it anymore. Okay, just don't do it again. Okay. But that just kept happening. And Hitler famously goes, man, these guys are weak. These are weak parents. They don't back up what they say. I can basically do whatever I want. And they're just gonna give me what I want. And so that's why that's the story of this first paragraph, is the appeasement that was given Hitler as he did this list of things. Europe was like, well, we just don't want to go to war. They were so traumatized from World War I that they were just not willing to stop Hitler when he was weak. And by the time they realized how dangerous he was, it was too late. So the war finally begins. He invades Czechoslovakia. That does not start the war. There's this famous thing called the Munich Agreement. And a German prime minister says, all right, you can have Czechoslovakia, but Hitler, just stop, be a good boy. And he comes back to England and goes, I have made peace with Hitler. We will have peace in our time. We will not have another war. Well, he was completely wrong, because Hitler doesn't stop. And the start of the war is September 1st, 1939. September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland. And at that point, the European powers go, finally, you know what? Hitler's not going to stop. If we keep buying him candy at the checkout aisle, pretty soon he's going to be telling us to buy him a car or buy him a house, you know.
What surprised the Allies a lot is that Russia helped Germany invade Poland.
Well, yeah, there is that element, but I usually save some of those details for the high school level. But yes, exactly. And so he invades Poland, and then so France and England finally do declare war on Hitler, September 1st, 1939. This time, France falls apart very quickly. France, in a matter of weeks, is defeated and surrenders. They just do not have the same fighting spirit that they had in World War I. They lost too many men, so they crumble pretty quickly. And so the thing you want to note about the beginning of the war is that Britain is left alone. Hitler very quickly, within a matter of months, takes control of basically all of Europe.
And the annoying thing is Britain didn't stop and just be quiet.
Well, right. So Britain, as an island off the coast, Britain is kind of like the last stronghold against Hitler after the first, start of the war. And so Britain's completely surrounded. They're experiencing this thing called the Battle of Britain, also known as the Blitz.
Blitzkrieg.
And that is where basically Germany is bombing Britain night and day into submission, trying to prepare for an invasion. He plans to invade Britain, called Operation Sea Lion. And so he's bombing Britain night and day. This is called the Blitz, called the Battle of Britain. But Britain is able to stand strong. If you've ever seen the signs that are now kind of famous where they say like, keep calm and carry on. And now they've changed it to keep calm and all sorts of different things. Those were posters put in throughout London during the Blitz, where they were just encouraging the people of London, stay calm. I know we're being bombed. I know we're being attacked, but we've got to stand firm, and we can't bow down to Hitler and make peace with him. Famously, Britain does not bow down, and Hitler is never able to invade England. And that's just important because that's going to cause him to do the stupidest thing of the war. And that's going to cause him, because he can't get to Britain in the West, he decides to invade the Soviet Union in the East. So he says, well, if I can't get Britain, then I'm going to go get the Soviet Union. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. That was a really bad idea. That was the worst tactical decision during the war. One of the other reasons, besides reason England is able to withstand Germany's attack, is their famous leader, Winston Churchill. He was very good at building support and encouraging the people. And the other was that the U.S., while staying neutral, the U.S. was neutral. Once again, we were isolationists. They did have this thing called the Lend-Lease program. They did have the Lend-Lease program, in which they were selling or renting war material to Britain. So I had the guise of like a commercial program, but they were sending supplies. Basically, the U.S. was sending supplies to Great Britain, which helped them survive. The Blitz. So then that'll get us into our second point. So that first, again, tell a story. Those of you who just jumped in, I've written at the top, tell a story up here, because don't just connect a bunch of boring facts and sentences. You need to tell the story in each of these paragraphs and ultimately throughout the whole summary. So that takes us to then the arsenal of democracy. Again, not to take away the nice little doodles, guys. Not to take away the bravery of our troops, but the real story for U.S. history of America winning in Europe is the economic story. That by the end of World War II, the U.S.'s economy was producing more material than every other participant in the war combined. And so it was the U.S.'s economy, and that's why this story of the second paragraph is the creation of that arsenal of democracy, the power of the U.S. economy to completely overwhelm its enemies. In many ways, the German troops were better trained than American troops. They had more experience. Their technology, their weapons were superior in a lot of ways to American technology, but America was just able to make a buttload of it. And so that's the story of the second paragraph. First, you want to just talk about how the economy shifted. You watched hopefully a couple of videos on that. Welcome, some of you who are just joining. The videos talked about how the economy boomed to life out of the Great Depression, and how a lot of the industry shifted, a lot of the factories shifted from making cars and making clothing or manufacturing certain goods, and they shifted to making war materials. There was also the benefit of, actually one of the great things the US did was the government didn't take control of the economy. They basically said, we'll pay you, we'll hire you companies to make money off of making these things for the war. And so the American businesses really, maybe we'll stop drawing on the board, little beast. Okay. Do something useful like participate. Thank you. Speak up. All right. was that the U.S. businesses really helped win the war. You also had a lot of unemployment because of the Great Depression. And so you had 16 million, by the end of the war, 16 million Americans would serve in the military. That's 11% of our population. Over 1 out of 10 people served in the military during World War II. That's massive. That's a massive fighting force. That's a massive labor force. So again, they've converted factories. Where'd they get the labor from? With all these men going to war, where'd they get the labor?
Women.
Women. So the women go to work. The women fill the factories. That's never going to change. Women are, from this point on, women are going to largely enter the workforce at greater and greater amounts. They also instituted rationing. You could only have so much of certain key supplies during the war. You'd have a ration card that you would take into the store, and it showed you get your allotment of sugar or your allotment of meat or your allotment of whatever. So they did have rationing. That was part of the economic shift. They had victory gardens. They said, hey, people, grow as much of your own food as possible so that we can send the food from the farms over to the soldiers. They did bond drives. We talked about that during World War I. They sold people bonds. The war was largely paid for by loans from the American citizens who bought war bonds. And so the economy really boomed to life. It produced, anyway, I won't throw out a number because that'll just be random. So it's really an economic story. The U.S. strategy. Who did the U.S. know they had to defeat first in the war?
Hitler.
Hitler, right.
Hitler.
Pearl Harbor happens first. We declare war against Japan first, but Hitler, because of the resources and because of the scientific threat, and they knew Japan had limited resources, it was a Germany first strategy. They'd also gotten this little note from Albert Einstein to FDR saying, hey, just so you know, the Germans are working on atomic weapons.
Oh, great thing.
Yeah, so that's what we call an existential threat, a threat for survival. So they said, we have got to stop Germany first, and then we'll deal with Japan. They were fighting on both sides, but there was a little bit more of a push towards Germany. Then the other key aspect of the strategy is the idea of total war. They said, you know what, we're not going to win the war by just killing German soldiers. We're going to win the war by high altitude bombing of their cities, their factories, their rail yards, their fuel depots. It's not a matter of killing German soldiers. It's destroying their ability to make war on the home front. And we talked about how this kind of began during the Civil War. And then civilians, a lot were killed during World War I. World War II is going to take that even further. And they said, just like I said, the reason the Americans are going to win is because of our economy. There were no Germans and Japanese blowing up Detroit, Los Angeles, Chicago, where we were manufacturing, Long Beach, where we were making all our stuff. And so it wasn't a matter of losing soldiers. It was, we've got to destroy their economy. We have to destroy their economy. And so the key aspect of our strategy was sending up all those bombers, those B-17s, and later B-24s, B-52s, but mostly the B-17, and bombing night and day the German cities and destroying their ability to make the supplies that they needed to make war.
But I think it's the most funniest story is that the reason Russia was able to beat the Germans was because of the winter.
Well, yeah, their most famous general was known as General Winter. And so, yeah. So the other last thing about we'll note this in the so what, we're under protecting the innocent, but more civilians are killed in World War II than soldiers. I think it's the first war where that's officially tallied, because the chief targets of the Allied attack was not just soldiers, but it was the factory. They weren't trying to kill civilians, but they knew they had to destroy. They knew they had to destroy the factories and the fuel supplies and the rail yards and the repair yards and stuff like that. Again, remember the story of Pearl Harbor. The Japanese blew up a lot of ships, but what did they not destroy? They didn't destroy our fuel supplies. They didn't destroy the dry docks. And so we were able to just rebuild everything again very quickly. So that was a key to the U.S. strategy: Germany first, and then destroy their economy. Then just finishing off this idea of the arsenal of democracy is mass production. The U.S. was able to outproduce, as I've already said, the enemies, the Axis. That's the key to the victory. Again, the stories of heroism, the soldiers, absolutely. But in a big picture, it's a battle of economies. And so we're saying how the U.S. economy shifted and the German economy was the primary target of what we were trying to do. Some numbers for how mass produced the Americans were able to do. For every bomber that the Germans or the Italians shot down, the U.S. made 2 more. They were able to make 3 Jeeps every 4 minutes.
I thought it was. Oh yeah, you're right.
And then, as you saw in the video, they were able to build a ship, one of the biggest, known as a Liberty ship. How many days did it take to build an entire ship?
4 days.
Okay,
4 days.
like 3.5 to 4 days. So that's incredible amount of speed. So it's just like you can shoot them out of the sky, Germany, but there's just going to be 2 more to replace every single one you shoot down. The average American soldier had 50 pounds of supplies to support him. Sometimes that was a negative. We sent troops into battle with too much junk. But I think for the Japanese, it was something like 10 pounds of supplies. For a German, it was like 20 pounds of supplies. Those are just my vague estimates. But for Americans, they had 50 pounds of supplies per soldier. So again, the fighting man was great, but there was such an economic might behind them, it was overwhelming. And we see that reflected again when we talked about Midway last week, that what gave our soldiers such an edge were things like we had code breakers, we had radar, we eventually would have the atomic bomb. Those are all products of a strong economy. Those are all products of technological innovation. And so that's why the story of the second paragraph is about the arsenal of democracy was the economy. And the target, the strategy for defeating Germany was to destroy their ability to make war, their economy. Does anybody want any questions before we get into our last point? Hey, Michael, good to see you, man. Well, again, if you've just joined, if you notice what's in bold at the top, I'll say it one more time. What I'm really looking for you to do is tell a coherent story throughout your paper and in each paragraph. Please don't just link a bunch of facts. That's one reason why I've kind of limited my notes today, because I just really want you to tell me the story. And so we've talked about appeasement and the start of the war, the economic story of the arsenal of democracy. And then let's talk about the kind of fortress Europe and how, you know, how some of the fighting actually, you know, the main turns in the actual fighting.
Well, what happened? What's like the limit on how long this summary can be?
Well, you should know more than 1.5 pages, Sam. Otherwise, you're writing a research paper. I know you know a lot, but if you want to write 2 versions, go ahead. If you just want to get it off your chest, I don't mind. I love World War II. I'll read it.
Yay.
Does anybody know? So first point, there's a famous phrase that Churchill said, and it was during the first Allied invasion of the war in Europe. And he said, this isn't the end. This isn't even the beginning of the end. He says, it's the end of the beginning. Meaning, all right, we finally got the beginning of this war over with. And this was referring to the first Allied invasion, Winston Churchill. But does anybody know where the U.S. invaded first during the war?
North Africa.
Yes, very good. It was this thing called Operation Torch. It was North Africa. The commander, anybody know who the Supreme Allied commander was?
Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Yep, Dwight D. Eisenhower. And so that was the first, it was too dangerous to go into continental Europe. So they had to go into North Africa first. And so they called it Europe's soft underbelly. Their idea was they were going to invade North Africa. They were going to battle up Italy and into Europe. And so that comes before. Now the idea of this is one, that's kind of the first invasion. So that's the first time Americans fight German soldiers is in North Africa under Dwight D. Eisenhower, Operation Torch. But the point is that this was a minimal engagement, and it actually does, the U.S. forces get stuck in Italy. And so where did most of the fighting in Europe take place? Where did most of the fighting take place?
In France.
Oh, not
Soviet
France,
Union.
no. Yes, the Soviet
Russia.
Union, Russia. If you haven't, hopefully you watched that video of the fallen. But who lost the most soldiers in the war?
Britain.
Soviet Union.
The Soviet Union, by 28 million people. 28 million people, half civilians, half soldiers. America, we're going to lose 400,000. 400,000, not even 500,000. Soviet Union is going to lose 28 million people. I think the Soviet Union troops, they killed something like 6 Germans for every 1 German soldier killed by an American or British soldier. So we focus on the American side. We're going to talk about D-Day, but in this story of this last paragraph, make sure the only reason D-Day is going to work is because the Soviet Union were kicking butt in the Eastern Front. and they were just losing millions and millions and millions of their own people, especially at this thing called the Siege of Stalingrad.
Oh no.
And one of the reasons D-Day has to happen is Stalin, who's the leader of the Soviet Union, says, guys, I'm losing millions of people. I'm killing all these Germans. I'm totally under assault. You guys need to attack. You need to attack on the other side because I can't take the full brunt of the German force. And so that's going to take us to Operation Overlord here.
I mean, if we're going to be honest, it's kind of Russia's fault for kind of teaming up with Germany and then like not seeing and taking the warning from the Allies that he's going to invade them.
I'm not gonna assign blame or anything. Just gonna go with the fact of who did the fighting. No, I honestly, I have my own views as it's kind of nice to watch Nazis and communists destroy each other. But again, on June 6th, 1944, we have Operation Overlord. That's D-Day. That's the invasion of France, the invasion of Normandy. That's Saving Private Ryan, if you've seen that. But the only reason one reason that's going to work is because, again, 5 out of 6 German soldiers were fighting in the east, in places like Poland and the Ukraine, against the Soviet Union, so that they did not have much of their firepower in France to stop this invasion. Again, it was brutal, it was difficult, but appreciate the fact that the role that the Soviet Union played.
Mr. Mefford, should we bring up the fact that Omaha Beach was the one with the most deaths?
You can, because that's what we're going to get into. The invasion force on D-Day was 150,000 Allied troops. It's the largest invasion up to that time in history. The heaviest losses were the Americans, who had to take a stretch of beach called Omaha Beach. It was brutal. That's actually where the best German soldiers were positioned. In some of the other beaches, they had soldiers from like Poland who were being forced to fight, and they tended to surrender pretty quickly. But on Omaha Beach, those were some crack German soldiers, and we had some heavy losses. Again, that's the scene that starts out Saving Private Ryan. Go ahead.
Yeah, there was a person on Omaha Beach. It was a German who was shooting a machine gun, and he recalled that he shot the machine gun for 9 minutes straight without pausing, and the barrel that he forgot to cool it down heated up a lot. It was like literally turning red. And later on, his gun kind of got destroyed from battleships, and it was causing forest fires because the barrel was so hot. Later on, he met up with a American soldier after years have passed after Omaha Beach, and now they're great friends, which is kind of ironic.
Yeah, you see some powerful stories of American and German troops becoming friends. So the goal of D-Day was to, again, open up another attack on Germany to help the Soviet Union in the east, take off some of the pressure. Their goal was Paris. They wanted to reach Paris and liberate France, and then push on into Germany. They knew, if you remember, in World War I, the Allies never invaded Germany. They just got stuck on the Western Front, and eventually Germany signed the armistice, and the war ended. This time they knew they had to actually invade Germany, invade its capital, Berlin, so that Germany had to admit they were completely and totally defeated. So after D-Day, they're able to get to Paris. Hitler's final push, does anybody remember the battle in which it's basically the last German attempt to stop defeat? It takes place in winter. They do kind of a secret attack right around Christmas.
The Battle of Bulge?
Yeah, very good. Yep, they call it the Battle of the Bulge. And you just note that's kind of after D-Day, that's kind of Germany's last attempt to stop the successful invasion of Germany. It creates a lot of chaos, but ultimately does fail. And after that battle, the Allies are able to sweep into Germany.
Clearly did not learn from invading Russia that you do not fight in the winter.
Well, that was something we needed to learn. We didn't think they would do it during the winter, so we were caught completely unprepared during that battle.
Good point.
But again, they just didn't have enough troops, and we were able to push it back. And so the war ends in April 1945. Hitler's surrounded. He's got Russians at the gates of Berlin. He's got Americans pushing in from the west. Germany's collapsing. And so Hitler commits suicide in April. I think it's like April 30th. And then the formal surrender is like May 4th or May 5th, 1945. So a little under a year from D-Day, the war in Europe is over. And if you notice, that's 5 months before the dropping of the atomic bombs. The atomic bombs are going to be dropped in September of 1945. And so the war in Europe, according to the Hitler First Strategy or Germany First Strategy, is achieved. Hitler's defeated first, and then the US turns to finishing off Japan in the Pacific. The last thing you'd want to note in this is the final solution. What does that refer to? I know there was a trouble with the link, but I had reposted it.
The atomic bomb.
Nope.
Oh, that's in the Pacific Theater. Never mind.
Yeah, that's right. What does the final solution refer to? What did the Americans find as they overran German territory? What did they find out that the Germans were doing the whole time?
Concentration camps.
Concentration camps. The final solution refers to the systematic genocide or mass extermination of the Jews under German control. And so they start to liberate these camps. And there were rumors that this was happening, but nobody really wanted to believe the Germans were really doing this. And then when they began to come across these camps, extermination camps and concentration camps, it was just shocking. And it really kind of steeled in the hearts of a lot of soldiers, why they were doing this. That the war was, that's why a lot of times World War II is called a good war, because when they look at what Germany was doing, how could you not argue that that was worth fighting for, to stop that mass genocide? How many Jews were killed?
6 million?
Yeah, 6 million Jews. I think there were others. There were other Poles. There were, Christians. There were Catholics. There were, homosexuals. They went after other people. I think the total number is something like 8 to 10 million, but it was 6 million Jews. They would kill them by gas. Famously, they had the gas chambers. They would also just work them to death. They starved a lot of them to death. Some of them were hunted down with killing squads. They would just go out into towns in the countryside and just systematically wipe them out. But it was a systematic industrial murder system where, again, they were experimenting on the Jews. They were trying to find, how can we kill the most? They stopped shooting them eventually because they realized, that it costs too much money to shoot people. If we gas them, it's easier. And so it's really, really horrible. The amount of intelligence and effort that was brought to bear to, again, that's why it's called the final solution. It was a program. It was a systematic program to eliminate the Jews from existence. And this really shocks and motivates Allied troops again, as I said, realizing this is what we were fighting for, because this is inhuman what's taking place. And one of the powerful things that's going to come out of the Holocaust is this is why we're going to eventually restore Israel. 1948-49 is when Israel becomes a nation again. It hadn't been a country since the Roman Empire had destroyed Jerusalem. But they finally get their country back because people, after seeing the Holocaust and the final solution, they said, you know what, the Jews need a homeland. The Jews need a place where they can call their own, because they're always a minority under threat in other countries. Okay, any other questions? We'll just talk about the so whats. Again, you're not going to get much above a B+ if you don't put a little bit of explanation into your so whats. So make sure you can be clear. The war in Europe really matters. We got 3 key reasons. One is it just shows the victory of democracy over totalitarianism. Hitler called democracies weak. He never thought people who lived in a free republic where they could do and own and live however they wanted and believe how they wanted. He thought that was a weak civilization, and that was inferior to Nazism. He thought they'll never sacrifice in order to stop me. And again, appeasement encouraged him in that view. But the outcome of the war, including the economic outlook, the victory of capitalism, the US economy over the totalitarian economy controlled by the government, shows that free people with a free economy fighting for individual freedom, I believe, is superior to anything that totalitarianism can put out. Yes, again, very nice doodles, but again, I'll be happy. You need to focus in here. Secondly, I was listening to the reason, if you want to talk, what was World War II fought over? It was fought to protect the innocent. World War II was the first war where more civilians were killed than soldiers. And hopefully, again, if you did not watch that video, that's sad, because you just see how many civilians were killed. And that was largely by the Germans and the Japanese. The Germans and the Japanese killed millions of Koreans and Chinese. And Germany, as we just talked about, killed millions and millions of Russians, Poles, Ukrainians, and Jews. that were not soldiers. They were just wiping out civilians. And so the idea of stopping Japan and stopping Germany was really a battle to protect the innocent. The total dead number for World War II stands at about 72 million people. 72 million people. It's just absolutely incredible. Again, they thought World War I was bad. That came in, I think, somewhere around 20. But then 72 million, again, most of those civilians killed by Japanese, civilians killed by Japanese soldiers or killed by German soldiers in Europe. And then finally is the idea of the world superpower. Twice, or the US has repeatedly tried to stay in isolationism. That would finally end after World War II, where the US would say, you know what, if we had gotten involved sooner, we might have stopped Hitler earlier. We might have stopped Hitler earlier. And so this is where the US kind of becomes a world superpower, and kind of this idea of we're going to be a little bit of a policeman or a force in the world for good in order to protect the two things you've already talked about, democracy and protect the innocent. The other rival superpower coming out of World War II is who? Who's the only other nation really with any sort of strength left after the war?
The Soviet Union.
The Soviet Union. And so the war ends with Europe in shambles and the Soviet Union and the US posed as the world superpowers. And that's worth mentioning because that's going to transition into the Cold War that we'll talk about in a few weeks. Because the US is going to be deeply involved in world issues, and they're going to be in competition with the Soviet Union. Because even though the Soviet Union, they were allies of the US, they're really only allies because Germany was their common enemy. Once Germany's defeated, American democracy and capitalism doesn't really get along with Soviet Union communism and totalitarianism. Alrighty. Any questions about this or otherwise? We've got one more week. Easter is next week.
Yeah. In the first paragraph for the appeasement, you were saying, who's the person in Britain, like in charge of Britain, or the guy that was like
the guy who appeased Hitler and gave him what his wants. His name was let me make sure I get his first name. William Chamberlain.
Okay.
Chamberlain.
Thank you.
Yeah. Once the war starts, they're going to get rid of him because they realize he was wrong. He didn't get everybody peace, and that's when Winston Churchill replaces him. So Winston Churchill actually leads Britain during the war, but Chamberlain's the one who appeased Hitler.
So which one helped Britain? The Winston?
Churchill actually helped Britain. So Winston Churchill is the one who helped them survive during the Blitz. Chamberlain's the one who basically let Germany have Czechoslovakia.
His ship was Queen Mary. That's what got him to like all those conferences for Stalin and all that. That was the ship he used.
That was a fast
ship.
Fast ship. Yeah, the U-boats couldn't keep up with it. Okay. Anything else? Other questions?
Yeah.
Sorry, somebody sounds like maybe they're trying to talk, but I can't quite hear them. Any? Make sure you check on Google Classroom when the next website checkup is. I think it's April 20th. So that's the Monday. That's the Monday after Easter. Is your next website checkup. And we'll do an event next week. We'll do this conference call next week on Thursday because Friday's Good Friday. So I'll set up the appointment, but it'll be Thursday morning next week because there's no school next Friday. And then there'll be no school the week after that. Praise the Lord.
No
okay.
DC trip either.
Sorry, what?
No DC trip either.
I know. Well, yeah, that's too bad. We have to see about potentially doing something next year that involves the
next September.
The class. Yeah. Well, whether September or again, just in other words, not letting. We can look for an opportunity to make that up. All right, you guys. Well, I appreciate it. That we'll wrap it up there. It's perfect 45-minute class. I'll post this video, and again, tell a story. Make sure you tell a story. Oh, also, that's what I was going to say. If you didn't see, there is that extra credit opportunity watching the Band of Brothers documentary that I posted. If you watch that and do the response that's outlined on that assignment, that replaces two of your lowest
Okay.
zeros or two of your lowest scores. And you have the whole month of April to do that if you want. It's just a great interview with a bunch of the guys in the 101st Airborne who dropped, didn't go on the beaches on D-Day, but they were dropped behind enemy lines on D-Day. And then they went on to fight in the Battle of the Bulge and some other things. And it's just Survivor. Anyway, it's a powerful
Hi, Mom.
documentary. So you're welcome to just watch that. And you're also welcome to do the extra credit attached to that. If you have any missed summaries, any zeros, or even low quiz scores or any of those, it'll replace two of those. All righty, friends. We're going to sign off. Appreciate it. Nice to see you all.
Bye.
Bye, Emma. Bye, Mackenzie. Bye, Sam. Bye, Joey.
Bye.
What else we got? Bye, Matthew. Bye, Davi. Bye, Gracious.
I
Bye,
want to leave.
Brianna. Bye, Russell.
Soviet Union.
Okay, Zoom chat me with any questions. Bye, Eric. Bye, Naomi.